Elias Taylor stood in the dimly lit cockpit of his damaged shuttle, staring at the fading stars outside the small cracked window, the hum of the engines sputtering in his ears, his hands gripping the control panel trying to stabilize the craft after the chaotic battle that had left him stranded in deep space. The shuttle systems flickered erratically, the blinking lights taunting him with every passing second of helplessness. The alien forces had overwhelmed the small human fleet, and in the chaos his ship had taken critical damage as it tried to retreat to the nearest space station. The alien ships had been relentless, tearing through his defenses without mercy, leaving him with no choice but to attempt a desperate emergency landing on a nearby station that he had never seen before, a station he hadn't even known existed. It loomed in the distance like a ghost, its immense structure almost imperceptible against the blackness of space. But it was his only option, he had no other choice. As his shuttle drifted closer to the station, the systems began to fail, the hull creaked under the pressure of damaged shields, and the oxygen levels started to drop slowly but steadily. Elias quickly rerouted the power from the non-essential systems to the life support systems, trying to buy himself some time, but even his engineering expertise couldn't delay the inevitable. He needed to land, or he would suffocate long before he could even think about escape or repair. The alien station loomed larger in the view screen, and as he scanned it with his instruments, he noticed something odd. The station was ancient, far older than anything humanity had encountered before. Its design was sleek and unfamiliar, as if it had been built by a race that had long since disappeared. Its massive exterior was covered in strange symbols and alien script that Elias couldn't make sense of yet. He didn't have time to analyze the markings. The shuttle was on a collision course, and the landing bay was his only chance to survive. He guided the shuttle toward the docking port, trying to ignore the shaking of the craft, the alarms blaring, warning him of further system failures. His heart raced as he fought to control the descent. But as he neared the bay, something shifted inside him. A creeping sense of dread washed over him. What if this station wasn't abandoned? What if there were still inhabitants here? What if they had seen his arrival and were already preparing to deal with the unexpected visitor? His thoughts were interrupted by a loud jolt as his shuttle hit the docking port with a crash. The entire station seemed to groan in protest as the shuttle connected, and the door hissed open, revealing the dark, empty hallway inside. Elias quickly checked the shuttle systems, all critical damage, but it had landed intact for now. With a deep sigh of relief, he grabbed his toolkit and prepared himself for whatever came next. He didn't know if the station had any working power, or if it even had any food or water, but he couldn't afford to sit idle. He had to find a way to survive. The moment his boots hit the cold metallic floor of the station, he knew this was no ordinary place. The air smelled stale, and the walls were covered in dust and decay, yet everything seemed strangely intact, untouched by time. Even though he knew the station had been abandoned for years, perhaps longer, the silence around him was deafening. The vastness of the station stretching endlessly in every direction. But he had no choice now. He had to survive. This place was his new reality, and he would face it with the same resolve that had kept him alive through every other challenge he'd ever faced. Surroundings: the hallway was narrow and dark, the faint glow from the emergency lights casting long shadows on the walls. The metallic floors beneath his boots were slick with some kind of residue, but everything appeared intact. The station hadn't been ravaged by time like he expected. There were no signs of battle or destruction, nothing that would explain why it had been left behind. He pulled his toolkit from his belt and began examining the control panel near the hallway entrance. He needed to figure out how to bring the station's systems back online and see if there was any way to contact the outside world. Maybe there was a communication array he could repair, or at least send a distress signal to anyone passing by. There had to be something here that could help him survive, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. The technology was clearly alien, far beyond anything humanity had developed so far. As he began working his fingers, deftly moving across the control panel, Elias couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he wasn't truly alone in this place. The thought crept up on him again and again. Despite the station's silence, something about the way the walls seemed to watch him made him uneasy, but he pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. The buttons clicked beneath his hands, the screen flickering to life, Before his eyes, symbols and markings flooded the screen, and though they were foreign to him, some of the patterns seemed strangely familiar. It was as if they were designed with a logic he could almost understand. The problem was he had no idea what these symbols meant, but that didn't stop him from trying every command he could think of. It wasn't long before he hit a button that caused the station's emergency lights to brighten, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air. A small victory, but enough to prove the station wasn't completely dead after all. With every piece of equipment he managed to turn on, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. For hours he moved through the station's corridors, retracing his steps, finding more panels to fix, more systems to repair. One by one, he brought the station's basic life support functions back online, restoring the oxygen supply and regulating the temperature. With a few quick adjustments, he was starting to feel like he was gaining ground on the once imposing task ahead. After a while, Elias reached the central hub of the station, where a large control room stood. The walls were lined with glass windows, offering a panoramic view of the vast emptiness of space. Outside, the room was filled with the same alien technology, but it was more advanced than anything he had seen so far. This was clearly the heart of the station, and if there was a way to regain full control, this was where it would happen. His first priority was to get the communication system up and running. He couldn't afford to waste any more time waiting for help to come. He needed to send a signal, but as he approached the main console, he froze. The screen flickered to life on its own, and strange markings appeared across the display before his eyes. An encrypted message from an unknown source blinked on the screen. The language was unlike anything he had ever seen, but there was one word he could read amidst the garbled symbols: rescue. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The word was too coincidental, too precise to ignore. But who was it meant for? And why was it appearing now? He needed answers, and fast. Elias stared at the encrypted message on the screen, his heart racing as the word rescue blinked repeatedly. The strange symbols surrounding it were a jumble of alien script that made no sense to him, but that one word stood out like a beacon in the dark. He quickly ran his hands over the console, trying to access the rest of the message, but no matter what commands he entered, the screen remained frozen on that one word. Frustration bubbled up inside him, but he forced himself to calm down. The answer was here somewhere. He just had to keep looking. He moved away from the console and began scanning the room for any other clues. The walls were lined with strange data terminals and monitors, but most of them seemed to be offline or damaged. He moved to the closest one, and after a few minutes of examining the wiring, he was able to pry open the panel and access the internal components. The terminals had been built with a complexity that was both impressive and intimidating, but with his skill set, Elias knew he could work through it. As he began to reconnect circuits and reroute power to the terminal, the lights overhead flickered for a moment, but then stabilized. A small victory that brought some hope. He activated the console, and the screen blinked to life once more, this time showing a series of encrypted files. They were far more complex than the simple distress message he had seen before, but Elias could sense there was something important buried within the data. It was a challenge he had to face. He took a deep breath and began the long process of decrypting the files. It was slow going. The alien code was far beyond anything he had encountered before, but with each line he deciphered the mystery, started to unfold. The files spoke of a once great alien civilization that had constructed the station as part of an ambitious project, a network of stations built across the galaxy designed to monitor and catalog life forms from countless planets. The station where Elias had landed was one of the first ever created, but it had been abandoned for reasons the files did not explain. As Elias continued to dig deeper into the files, he uncovered a chilling revelation. The alien race had been wiped out by a catastrophic event, a series of violent conflicts that had torn through their empire, leaving the stations abandoned and left to decay over the centuries. But one detail stood out among the rest. Buried in the final files was a warning, an automated message from the station's original creators. It spoke of a contingency plan that had been activated upon the destruction of the alien race, a plan that involved rescuing a species from the ashes of the empire. Elias felt his blood run cold. Was the message meant for him? Was humanity the species they had intended to save? Did this station hold the key to their salvation? Or had he simply stumbled upon something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined? He couldn't answer those questions yet, but he knew one thing for sure: he had to find out more. If the station had truly been designed with humanity in mind, then the technology here might be far more advanced than anything humanity had ever dreamed of, and that could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Determined to uncover the full extent of the alien plans, Elias focused all his attention on the decrypted files. The more he read, the more questions emerged. But one thing became clear: he wasn't just a stranded engineer anymore. He was now part of something much bigger, and whatever he uncovered in this station could alter the future of the entire galaxy. Elias sat back in the chair, his mind racing as he processed the decrypted files. The realization of what he had uncovered began to sink in. This station wasn't just an abandoned relic. It was part of something far greater, a hidden network of alien outposts designed to monitor and catalog life across the galaxy. But what had been their true purpose? Who were they meant to save? And why had they left humanity out of their calculations? He felt a rising sense of urgency. The deeper he dug, the more he understood how important this place was. If he could uncover the full extent of the alien race's plans, perhaps he could find a way to turn the tide in favor of humanity. But there was still so much unknown, so much he had yet to understand. The station was filled with clues and mysteries that could take years to fully decipher. But Elias didn't have years, he had only days before his situation became too dire to reverse. With a renewed sense of purpose, Elias focused his efforts on restoring the communication system. The station's distress signal had been received by him, but there was no telling whether anyone had responded, or if the message had even reached the intended recipients. He couldn't afford to wait for another stroke of luck. He had to take control of the station's comms now. He moved quickly through the station's halls, following the dim emergency lights toward the central communications array. It was a vast room with walls lined with alien technology and flickering consoles, most of them still inoperative. But there was one central unit that appeared to be fully functional. Elias wasted no time stripping away the broken panels and reconnecting the power cables, his mind working in overdrive as he navigated the station's bizarre systems. He had never seen anything like this before, but the knowledge he had gained over the past few days gave him the confidence to press forward. Minutes stretched into hours as he worked to repair the system, but finally the console beeped and a faint signal flashed on the screen. Elias could hardly believe it, but there it was, a response. The message was garbled, but it was a start. He leaned in closer, trying to decipher the words. The static crackled, but he could make out a few key phrases: human, alive, come. The message was faint, but it was unmistakable. Someone had heard his distress signal and was now responding. With a surge of adrenaline, Elias immediately started working to boost the signal and enhance the transmission. He had to make sure the message reached its destination. He needed to know who was out there and what they wanted from him. Were they allies or enemies? And how had they come to be aware of humanity's presence in this forgotten corner of the galaxy? The answers were out there, and Elias was determined to find them. As he worked furiously, the communication system slowly began to stabilize, and the message began to clear up. At first it was fragmented, but gradually the words became more coherent. Human survivor. The voice on the other end said in a calm but distant tone, "We know of your species. We are coming to help." Elias' breath caught in his chest. The voice was strange and alien, but there was something reassuring about it, a promise of rescue. But as the words settled into his mind, a nagging doubt crept into his thoughts. Who were these beings? And why had they waited so long to make contact? Was this truly a rescue mission? Or was there something else at play? Was this part of the alien race's contingency plan? Or had Elias unwittingly activated something far darker than he could comprehend? The answers remained just out of reach, but for the first time since landing on the station, Elias felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone, and someone out there was coming for him. But the questions only continued to mount. Who were they really? What did they want? And what did his newfound knowledge about this station mean for humanity's future? Elias sat in the dim glow of the communication console, his mind racing as the strange voice on the other end of the line spoke those cryptic words. "We are coming to help." The promise of rescue was almost too much to believe, but something in the way the message was delivered made him cautious. It wasn't the warmth of a human voice. There was a distance, a coldness that set off warning bells in his mind. Were these beings really here to help? Or was there something else beneath the surface? He couldn't afford to trust them blindly, not yet, not until he understood more about who they were and what they wanted from him. He needed to buy more time and gather more information before making any decisions. The alien station was filled with technology he hadn't yet fully explored, and there was no telling what secrets it might hold, secrets that could either protect him or doom him. Determined to learn more, Elias set his sights on the station's central control room, the place where all the station's systems were monitored and operated. If there were answers to be found, this was the place to start. He moved quickly through the darkened corridors, the weight of uncertainty heavy on his shoulders, every sound echoing through the silent station, as if the walls themselves were whispering secrets he was not meant to hear. As he reached the control room, Elias felt a wave of unease wash over him. The door to the room was slightly ajar, as if it had been opened recently. He hesitated for only a moment before pushing it open. The room was vast and filled with alien consoles, monitors, and systems. He could barely comprehend. The air was thick with the hum of dormant machinery. The very walls of the room seemed alive with energy, but there was no sign of anyone else, no alien presence watching him, no movement beyond his own steps. He stepped inside and approached the main console, a massive structure dominating the center of the room. With trembling hands, he began to interact with the controls. It was a complex web of alien technology, but Elias had always been a quick learner, and his human mind thrived on problem-solving. He scanned through the systems, looking for any clue that might shed light on the mystery of the station and its creators. After several minutes of intense focus, he found something, a log file hidden deep within the station's archives. It was encrypted, but Elias had learned enough of the alien language to understand the key principles he needed to unlock it. With a few calculated keystrokes, the file decrypted, and the screen flashed to life, revealing a series of recorded transmissions from the station's creators. The transmissions were chilling. The first few logs spoke of their grand vision of cataloging and monitoring life across the galaxy. But as the logs progressed, the tone shifted. The aliens' voices grew more frantic. The last few logs were filled with desperation as their empire began to crumble under the weight of an internal war. The creators of the station had been watching from the shadows as civilizations across the galaxy fought and destroyed each other, but they had one goal in mind: survival, their own, and that of the species they deemed worthy of saving. The final transmission was the most disturbing. The voice that spoke was strained and filled with fear. "We have activated the contingency plan. The human species will be tested for eligibility." Elias froze. The words echoed in his mind. The human species tested for eligibility. What did that mean? And why had they singled out humanity? The implications were terrifying, but before he could process it further, a loud clanging noise echoed through the station, and the communication console flashed once more. A new message had arrived. It was brief but clear: "Human survivor, do not trust the station. It is a trap." The message was cut off abruptly, leaving Elias in stunned silence. The warning had come too late, and the realization hit him hard. Whatever he thought he had uncovered about the station's purpose was just the beginning of a much darker mystery. Elias' heart pounded in his chest as the message flashed across the screen. "Do not trust the station. It is a trap." The warning was brief, but it hit him like a bolt of lightning. Everything he had uncovered so far suddenly seemed more dangerous. The truth he had stumbled upon had to be far more complicated than he had imagined. If the message had come from another human survivor, or even an ally, then it meant that someone out there knew something he didn't. But the question was, why had they waited so long to send the warning, and who had sent it? He didn't have time to dwell on the confusion. He needed to act fast. The station was no longer a place of safety. It was a potential death trap, and Elias had to figure out how to get out before whatever forces were behind it could enact their plan, whatever it was he thought about the contingency plan. The alien race had spoken of a test for humanity's eligibility. What could that possibly mean? And why had they been watching humanity all this time? Elias rushed back to the communication console, checking the transmission history, in hopes of finding any trace of the mysterious message's origin, but the logs were filled with static, and the signal was weak. There was nothing more to go on. He had to find another way out, and quickly. His mind raced as he recalled his earlier scans of the station's blueprints. The docking bay where he had landed was located on the lower levels, and from his previous exploration, it seemed to be the closest exit that could lead him to an escape pod, or some kind of shuttle if the station had one, but it also meant navigating through more of the unknown sections of the outpost parts of the station he hadn't yet explored, and where there might be dangerous surprises waiting. Determined, he grabbed his toolkit and made his way through the corridors again, but this time with a new sense of urgency. The silent halls seemed even darker and more foreboding as he pressed forward. Every corner held the potential for danger, and he knew he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The station wasn't just abandoned, it was a maze of alien technology and hidden traps designed to keep intruders out, or worse, to test them in ways Elias couldn't begin to comprehend. The deeper he went, the more he felt like something was watching him. The walls of the station seemed to close in on him. Every flicker of a light made him jump, and every sound echoed in his ears like a distant whisper of things that might be lurking in the shadows. But he pressed on, driven by the need to survive and the hope that there was still a way to turn the tide. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he reached the docking bay, only to find it eerily silent. The bay doors were slightly ajar, but the sight that met him was nothing like what he expected. There were no escape pods or shuttles, as he had hoped. Instead, he found more of the alien technology he had seen throughout the station, but now it was all active. The equipment hummed to life on its own, as if it had been waiting for him. Elias froze as the realization hit him hard. This wasn't just an escape route. It was another part of the test. Whatever plan the aliens had set in motion, it was playing out now, and he was the subject of their experiment. The station wasn't abandoned at all. It was alive with purpose, and whatever that purpose was, Elias knew he had to find a way to break free from it before it was too late. Before he could move further, the lights dimmed, and a mechanical voice echoed throughout the bay. Test subject located. Initiating phase 2. Panic surged in Elias' chest as the bay doors closed behind him, trapping him inside. Whatever was about to happen, he had no idea, but he knew one thing for certain. The station wasn't just a place of refuge. It was a deadly game, and he was its unwilling player. Elias' pulse raced as the mechanical voice echoed through the docking bay. Test subject located. Initiating phase 2. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and the bay doors slammed shut with a resounding clang, trapping him inside. Panic surged through him as he turned toward the nearest control panel, desperate to find a way out. But it was no use. The alien technology was far beyond anything he could understand in such a short time. Every panel, every switch seemed like part of the test, and each one was mocking him, as if daring him to solve it. The room began to hum louder now, as if the entire station was alive and working in sync with some unseen force. Elias' breath quickened, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he realized that this was no longer just about surviving. The station's systems were deliberately interacting with him, as if he was the subject of some twisted experiment or observation. He backed away from the controls, his mind spinning as he tried to understand the situation more clearly. Every instinct told him to run, to escape, but there was no way out, not without understanding what was really happening. What was the purpose of this test? Why had he been chosen? And what did humanity have to do with it? Suddenly, the walls of the bay began to shift, the panels moving and reconfiguring themselves into new patterns. The station's layout seemed to be in constant flux, as if the station itself was adapting to him. Each twist and turn became more complicated, the passageways and doors opening and closing on their own, as if the entire station had transformed into a labyrinth specifically designed to trap him. Elias realized with a sinking feeling that there was no way out, not unless he played by the station's rules. But what were those rules? He had no idea, But he wasn't about to let it defeat him. He took a deep breath and tried to push aside the growing sense of dread. He had to remain calm, focus on the problem, and figure out how to manipulate the station to his advantage. He started by examining the environment around him, noticing the subtle changes in the station's behavior. The walls were no longer static. They seemed to be alive, almost sentient, and as they shifted, they revealed hidden pathways and compartments. Some doors that had been previously sealed opened up, as if inviting him to explore, but each time he reached one, the bay would shift again, making it impossible to make a direct route. Elias realized that the station was testing his intelligence and resourcefulness, every step of the way forcing him to outthink and outmaneuver it. The more he resisted, the more the station seemed to change its approach. He wasn't just a survivor here, he was being forced into a game with rules he still couldn't fully understand, but he had no choice but to play. With his toolkit in hand, he began to tinker with the alien systems again, this time focusing on the shifting walls that were blocking his progress. After some careful analysis, he found a weak point in the structure. It wasn't much, but with his knowledge of engineering, he managed to bypass a few of the station's controls, rerouting power and disabling some of the more aggressive security mechanisms. But he wasn't out yet. The moment the walls stopped shifting, the mechanical voice returned. Phase 2 completed. Proceeding to Phase 3, Elias felt a cold sweat run down his back as the air around him grew heavier. The lights flickered violently as the bay was plunged into darkness for a split second, and then an eerie green glow illuminated the walls, revealing more intricate and menacing patterns etched into the metal. These were not just decorations, they were warnings. Elias felt the weight of the situation settle in. He wasn't just being tested anymore, he was being pushed to his limits. This was a game of survival designed to break him down, and the worst part was that he didn't know how much longer he could keep up the fight. But he wasn't going to give up. He wasn't going to let whatever force was controlling this station have the satisfaction of breaking him. He gritted his teeth and moved forward with renewed determination. Whatever this test was, he would survive it. And when he did, he would take the answers the station had hidden from him and use them to find a way to break free before it was too late. Elias moved through the darkened docking bay, the eerie green glow casting long shadows across the walls as the station's systems hummed ominously around him. Every step he took felt like a deliberate choice in a game that was being played with him as its only participant. The air was thick with tension, the sense that the walls themselves were watching his every move. But Elias wasn't ready to give up, not now, not after everything he had uncovered. The station's challenges were relentless. Each room he entered seemed to twist and morph into something more complicated than the last. But he had adapted, he had learned the patterns, the way the station shifted its layout in response to his actions. He had become part of the puzzle itself. And the more he resisted, the more the station seemed to escalate its efforts to break him. But Elias refused to be broken. He paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts, his breath steady despite the chaos surrounding him. The mysterious voice had been silent for some time, but he knew that the next phase of the test was coming, and he had to be prepared. His mind raced as he recalled the transmissions he had decrypted earlier. They spoke of a contingency plan and a test of eligibility, but he still didn't understand what that meant or why humanity was at the center of it all. Was this truly a test for the survival of his species, or was it something more sinister? Suddenly, the mechanical voice echoed through the bay, once more, its tone colder than before. Final phase initiated. The words sent a chill down Elias' spine, and before he could react, the floor beneath him began to vibrate violently, and the walls shifted again, this time faster, more aggressively. The station was no longer just a maze. It was actively trying to trap him, to push him into a corner. The lights flickered wildly, and the bay's layout began to change with rapid, erratic shifts. Doors that had been open moments ago slammed shut, and new passageways materialized out of thin air. It was as if the very fabric of the station was alive and eager to destroy him. Elias bolted toward the nearest exit, his heart pounding in his chest. The bay doors were now sealed with thick metallic barriers, but he didn't stop to examine them. He knew he had no time to waste. If he couldn't find a way out now, he might never get another chance. His mind worked quickly as he assessed the situation. The station wasn't just shifting its layout. It was responding to his movements, anticipating them, and trying to contain him. But Elias had spent too much time figuring out its patterns. He had to use that knowledge to his advantage. He reached one of the newly revealed passageways, and for a moment, it seemed like his only option was to dive headfirst into the unknown. But the walls were closing in, and the sense of danger was palpable. Every second felt like a countdown to something terrible happening. Taking a deep breath, he pressed his palm against the wall, activating a sequence he had figured out earlier. It was a long shot, but it was the only option he had left. With a loud hiss, the metallic wall slid open just enough for him to slip through and into the narrow hallway beyond. Elias didn't stop to look back. He sprinted through the passageway, his breath coming in quick gasps as the station continued to react to his every movement. It was as though the station was alive and aware of his every decision. But Elias had no intention of letting it win. He reached a large chamber that seemed to pulse with energy, the walls lined with strange alien symbols, their glow faint but unsettling in the dim light of the hallway. He didn't hesitate. This was it. He had to make his final stand. With all the strength and knowledge he had gained, he activated the core systems of the station, his fingers moving rapidly over the alien controls. He had learned so much, but now it was time to use it all to break free, and if he was lucky, stop whatever dark plan the station had been set in motion to carry out. The systems hummed louder, the station seemingly resisting, but Elias persisted. With one final desperate push, he initiated a full shutdown of the station's core systems. His heart raced as he heard the mechanisms whir and grind against him, fighting to remain active. For a moment, everything fell silent, the entire station holding its breath. And then it happened. The lights flickered one last time before the hum of the station's systems finally ceased. Everything went dark, but this time it felt like freedom. Elias took a deep breath, the weight of the silence overwhelming him as the station's hold on him was finally broken. He had survived the test, and now, the answers that had eluded him for so long would be his to uncover. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was the key to unlocking whatever fate lay ahead for humanity and the galaxy.